Implementing hard drives, everybody's favorite subject. Our main objective is going to be explain the purpose and methods of partitioning a hard drive or formatting a hard drive and the variances, and obviously the common problems with it and how to maintain and troubleshoot. Partitioning, as we know, and I believe I stated before, is the process of electronically subdividing the hard drive to smaller units so that it's reserved. So that means it's like when you call and make a reservation, the seat is yours, right? But not until you get to the restaurant will they actually fix the table for you or format it. So they have a little cloth and you have your knife and fork on it. So partitioning, I'm reserving space. It doesn't mean anything's on there. It just says, hey, this here is mine. Cannot touch. That's all it does. Doesn't have any operating system or anything like that. Windows supports 3 types of partitions is one of the things that we obviously need to remember. You have the master boot record. You have the Windows proprietary dynamic partitioning scheme, which is the dynamic disk that we looked at inside the virtual environment. And you have the GUID partitioning tables, which is a GPT for the new partitions. MBRs could only go so much in one partition, while the GUID is a new one to be able to effectively partition it with large partitions. You have different flavors for formatting it. As we said, formatting creates a file system and it makes the root directory. Now I have my C drive in the file system when each partition and volume must have a format in order to be able to hold data. If I don't format it, I don't put my cloth on it, I don't put the actual forks and the actual plate, you can't eat on the table, can you? So it must be formatted. Just because you reserved your table doesn't mean you're gonna go and eat on the floor. You must format the actual hard drive. You got your FAT16s, you have your FAT32s, you have Ntfs, and you have the extended FAT64. Ntfs is the one that I brought in the compression, the encryption, disk quotas, and cluster sizes. All this we must learn in reference to the variances inside Windows. So what does partitioning mean for you? And by the way, in the gray book, this is textbook pages 938 through 944 for those who wish to know. In the gray book. Any questions or doubts so far? That's cute. Fix appliances in a hard drive. Just like, I guess you could always think about partitioning like when you do when you partition a room, right? You put like a little divider in the room. Let me know if my analogies don't help people. Sometimes it only helps me. Most of the time, never mind. Questions, doubts? So yeah, it's splitting it up into pieces. Partitioning, as I stated a moment ago. If Christina, if you can help me read this out here.
Hard drive partitioning overview. Partitioning is the process of electronically subdividing the physical hard drive into smaller units called partitions, also called volumes. A hard drive must have at least one partition. Partitions allow you to use multiple OSs in the same hard drive, one per partition. Windows supports 3 partitioning methods. 1. Master boot record, MBR. 2. Windows proprietary dynamic partitioning scheme, dynamic disk. 3. GUID partitioning table, GPT.
Thank you. Let's see what we can say here in reference to it. In the master boot record, in those, there is always a primary partition, which is usually the one that you mark for booting up. Then you have your extended partitions, which will use usually for your files and or saving extra stuff. The extended partitions obviously was because of the fact of its limitation. Does anybody know what is the limitation for partitioning a drive with an MBR?
If I remember right, I think it's how big the drive could be partitioned. I think it was like 2 terabytes.
That is correct. 2 terabytes. Minor resonance. Who else is only 2 terabytes? Anybody remember? What was my limitations of 2 terabytes so you guys can see why people never really pushed it back in the days? That was another hint. What's my maximum partitioning size for a FAT32?
1 gig. This is 1 gig.
It's actually FAT32. Most of them that have a FAT32 could only go up to 2 terabytes. Resonance Y, the actual MBR, the partitioning, this guy lasted almost an infinity until these hard drives started getting bigger than 2 terabytes. Prior to that, it was unnecessary, right? That's why MBR was up to recently, well, not recently, until the new hard drives come out, MBR was basically the only way of partitioning. Questions?
Can you repeat what you said? You're cutting up for me.
The what?
Sorry, you were cutting up. I couldn't hear everything you said.
I said that a FAT32 partition, the maximum that most operating systems will take, right? Like Windows 7, 10, whatever, FAT32 maximum is 2 terabytes. That's why master boot record has been there for the longest time, because hard drives before weren't bigger than 2 terabytes. So it was unnecessary to do a partition bigger than that.
Got it. Thank you.
The Windows dynamic disk, as we learned, that one's more of a proprietary one for their actual virtual disks. And then you have your GUI IDs or GUID, like calling it partition tables. That's for the new ones. One know that one. What's the maximum size of a GPT partition? You'll be surprised. No one? You guys read this chapter?
I'm getting flashbacks with my Linux class. There's things here that are the same. Not Linux itself, but like you can only partition 4 times with a master bootloader. I'm pretty sure that's gonna come up.
That is
Stuff
correct.
like that. There's some similarities, but after that, there is none.
It is ridiculous, the amount. It is actually 9.4 billion terabytes. That is the maximum that a GPT hard drive can have. 9.4 billion terabytes. Maximum partition. So like I said, MBR, 2 terabytes in size is the maximum. And another way that we can actually say 9 billion is actually, anyone know what ZB stands for?
Billion?
I'm sorry?
Zillion? Like petabytes? After petabyte, zillion?
There you go, zettabytes, that is correct. So you guys have to know these little bytes. There's megabytes, there's gigabytes, and there's many other bytes on top of that. So make sure you guys know the names, so when they start throwing out names out there, if and when they throw out these names, you know the different variances of size. Zettabyte, I believe, is highest they've been able to count to, obviously. It's in alphabetical names. There's Yoda bytes. No, I'm not making it up. Look it up. Any questions or doubts on partitioning before we continue? I want to make sure we understand this. All right. Next slide. MBR. Pablo, if you can help me with this slide, please. MBR.
We got the master boot record partition table. Hard drives using MBR partitioning scheme have a tiny bit of data in its first sector that is also called the master boot record. MBR also contains the partition table, which describes the number and size of partitions on the disk. The MBR partition tables support up to 4 partitions. When the PC boots up, the BIOS looks at the first sector of the hard drive for the instructions in the partition table to determine which partition contains the active operating system.
Thank you. Any questions or doubts on the MBR partition? So what's my other limitation that we just learned about an MBR partition? How many partitions?
4.
Once
Up
again,
to 4.
if you'll notice, 4 times 2 means that maximum I can use is 16 terabytes. No, 4 times 2 is 8. So that's 8 terabytes. Wow, where'd I get 16 terabytes from? So obviously that's another reason why they had to come up with a solution. They started coming up with drives that were huge and no one could use them, basically. So there had to be another solution. This is not formatting yet. So there's no FAT32, there's no FAT16, there's no FAT64. Nothing is on here except for an MBR. Any questions? Next.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So let's say if you're gonna have different OSs, technically speaking, with MBR, your max would be 4, right?
Yes.
Got it.
On the next slide here, we'll see the primary partitions. So MBR primary partition tables support 2 types. You have the primary and extended, as I stated before. Your primary partitions are the ones that support bootable OSs, while extended ones, as I said before, will not. A single MBR disk may have, as we said, 4 partitions or up to 3 primary and 1 extended. So technically, the 4th one I can't use to put an operating system on that, to boot up in MBR. Primary partitions are usually drives starting with C, not A, not B. Anybody remember who's A and B, or even know why A and B is being skipped? Who's my A and who's my B?
I'm gonna take a wild guess. I guess A is the.
I'm sorry? The guess, the what?
Sorry, I'm lagging a lot, so I can't tell what's going on.
Go ahead. No. The what? think I lost you, Lázaro. You're talking.
Nah, you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I was gonna just take a wild guess and guess that I guess the BIOS needs it, which would then be the master boot reloader, and then I know there's another application you need to run, the manager, I think, from Windows. I guess that would be like how it initiates it, and then C will be the operating system itself after boot everything up.
Okay. A and B were the old floppies. A would be, for instance, your 3.5, and B would be your 5. I think it was 5.25. The big discs, floppy disks. C would be your regular drive, and then D would be your CD drive. Those were the common letters in how they were used. C was always the one that they used to put the operating systems on for Windows. That's why they're saying C usually is the one that they start with. Any question?
What's C again? Sorry, I can't hear you well.
C is your primary partition that usually where Windows is installed. So usually the first letter that they use is C. A would be for the old floppy disks of 3.5 or 5.25. The big floppy one, the one that you could actually flop it and it would actually flop around because it was that soft. On the old traditional Apples, you remember the first Macs? It has a little flexible little disc. No? Nobody? That's A and B. That's where those letters usually were. And then C was always the first letter that you would use for any hard drive. Questions or doubts? All right, so your primary partition usually, like I said, is a drive C. Each primary partition on a single drive has a special setting stored in the partition called active that determines if the partition is actually active. Grub Boot Manager is used to control the multi-boot setups on one Linux OS. You'll see here you have the available with Grub. I'm not sure if anybody's ever used Linux, but that's the one that allows you to basically, on the boot up, say, hey, I want to go in with Ubuntu, or I want to go with Windows Vista, or whatever it is that I want. It brings this little friendly little menu in the actual screen when it first boots up. So, question. If a client walks up to you and asks, I told my friend I want to run parallels on my Mac. He told me that I would have to partition my drive. Now, start from the beginning. What does partitioning mean or look like? Can somebody help me? What does he mean by me that if I want to be able to run parallels on my Mac, I need to partition my drive? What does he mean that by that? Anybody can explain that to me?
I don't know what the term parallels means, like a reference to.
Okay. Anybody else confused on the word parallels?
I don't know if I'm still lagging. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm going to assume when the client meant parallel, he's talking about maybe a different operating system, because you can only have one operating system at a time if
Correct.
it's not being done with VM.
Mm-hmm. All right, so how would I do that?
Well, I'll ask the client exactly what he wants to run. In this case, if he wants to run 2 operating systems, then I'll have 2 partitions. One partition for the first operating system and the second one for the second operating system that he wants.
Okay. Any questions or doubts? So for those that haven't seen Parallels in Mac, here it is. Parallels Desktop 15 for Mac runs Windows on a Mac. So then I can be able to boot up, as he just stated, with Windows and have the features. Obviously, Mac is much more locked down, so you have to have stuff that allows you. Pretty sure Paulo could tell you it's almost impossible to break a Mac because they won't even let you mess with the drivers. Can you? Can you mess with the drivers? No, you can't. You won't be able to actually do anything to a Mac unless if it's actually allowed in certain aspects of when you install stuff. Any questions or doubts? So what's the major difference between an MBR and a dynamic disk?
Can you repeat that? I can't hear you. You said
What's the major
MVR?
difference? What is your major difference of a dynamic disk versus I forgot what question I just made up.
MBR.
Versus an MBR. Thank you. What's the variance between dynamic disks and a master boot record? What's the major difference? Think about it from what we've done so far in the
partition,
I'm sorry?
the size of the partition that can be made.
Mm-hmm. The MBR obviously is the one that has, you know, on the drive itself. A dynamic disk obviously are separate from a volume. It allows you to obviously have non-contiguous extends, and it's one or more physical disks. Dynamic disk can be multiple disks. One key thing to learn though, once you convert a disk to a dynamic disk, you cannot revert back. Not like if you have MBR and that on it. Here's our extended partitions. Any questions so far? Doubts? Our extended partitions contain multiple logical drives, as you see here, C, D, E, and then you have F and G, which is our extended partitions. They don't boot from these two because these do. Apparently, C, D, and E on this PC seems to be bootable partitions here, while these two are just logical drives to be able to use. Questions or doubts? What?
So
Go.
the purpose of an extended,
Go ahead.
so the purpose of extended drive is just to increase storage.
The purpose of an extended drive is, like I said before, the safest way to do things, although not everybody's doing this anymore, I don't know why, is to have a partition just only for the OS and the programs to install. I should have an extended partition for all of my documents and everything that I really want to save. Because if the OS happens to completely go kaput, we only pray that the other side of the hard drive is still good and that I can actually get the actual information out of that drive. I could actually take that drive, put it on another drive that has a good OS. I understand, yeah, that C drive may become, I can't read anything from it, but the D drive, I should be able to read from it on that other computer.
So for example, you partition a Windows on one drive, and then you have the extended one. Well, I don't think the point having extended it. You only have one operating system, but let's say you have multiple. You can have the
Partition is
extended
just
one.
the second partition that doesn't have a bootable OS. That's all it is. It doesn't mean that you can't have one bootable partition and one extended partition. You could have one bootable and the other one could be just the extended partition.
How many extenders can you have?
Anybody remember what's the limitation for MBR? We said it a moment ago.
Or
So there's 4 primary
So
partitions,
5 in total.
three primary and 1 extended.
Wait,
In here they have 5, yes.
so wait, is it 4 or 5? Now I'm more confused.
I wouldn't go too much with the picture there, but it is, my understanding, it is 4. It have a primary partition and extended partition. You won't be able to boot from these.
So if you have one primary only, that means you can have 3 extendeds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other question? All right. I'm going into now. All right, that is the right slide. Dynamic disks. The dynamic disk is storage to create structures called volumes. These number of volumes are obviously used to implement RAID, spanning, stripe, mirror over multiple drives. And these are the versions of Windows that are allow you to do it.
Read, span, stripe, or mirror.
So then dynamic disks are the ones that they use obviously for this. Only the lower end versions of Windows 7 don't support dynamic disks. So like the starter and or home would not allow you to do this. Any questions, doubts? So here goes your dynamic disks. If you'll notice here, you have disk 0, disk 1, and disk 2. So if you see here, he has got a RAID 5 on these 3 disks right here. 1, 2, 3. Those are his RAID 5. He has unallocated space, which he's not even touching. That means that black area is available. These colors are consistent always. If I see this little light blue, that is RAID 5. If I see the black, it's unallocated space. If I see that little greenish thing, that, my friend, is striped. If it's purple, it is a spanned volume. And lastly, that little brown one is my mirror. So with ease, with the color, you should be able to verify what is what. This is dynamic disks. Questions or doubts? So your GUI partition table, or the global unique identified partition table GPT scheme, is very similar to MBR, but obviously it removes your limitations. Under the number of partitions for Windows, limit is 128. Partitions larger than MBR limit obviously, of 2.2, as we stated earlier. GPT is arranged by LBA instead of sectors. LBA 0 is the protective MBR, a recreation of actually the MBR drive. So disk utilities know what GPT drive and do not mistakenly overwrite an actual partition. And so that the MBR can actually recognize it. GPT drives use the GPT header and partition entry array. Both are located at the beginning and the end of the actual drive. So they're a protected backup copy. The partitions of GPT drive go between the primary and the backup headers of the actual array of the disk. Questions? Okay. Windows can only boot GPT on a UEFI-based computer. What is a UEFI-based computer?
Type of BIOS has?
Thank you. It's the new BIOS, right? The new BIOS. So without the new BIOS that will recognize the drive, and it must be running on 64-bit version. Can't do that on a 32-bit. No, and so actually is ridiculous if you do it right. You got the limitations of 2 terabytes. All versions of Windows 10, 8.1, 8, and 7 can read GPT and use them for data. You just can't boot from them without a UEFI motherboard. Questions or doubts?
For Linux, it looks like it's built in, right?
Linux has a built-in support for GPT, yeah. But
Okay.
Apple's Intel Macs no longer use the APT, the Apple partitioning table. They actually use GPT. I'm not sure, for those who knew, Apple did have their own partitioning. Questions or doubts? We're still slicing up the pie here. We haven't put on anything on top of it. No whipped cream or anything on this pie. We're okay? So what's the main differences between MBR and GPT? What's the number of partitions in an MBR? What's the maximum?
4.
4?
Okay. Partition size. Is it more than primary header up to sector 0 up to 128 in Windows? You tell me.
Up to.
Location.
Sector 0.
Okay. In sector 0 here. GPT, the number of partitions is?
More than.
Up to 128 in Windows.
Okay. Everybody okay? Agree? Yes? No? Maybe? So? Close. But no cigar. Try one more time.
I see it really weird on your screen.
Let me stop the share for a second. Oh, wait a minute. There's much more downstairs or upstairs. That's what my problem is. No, we got all 4 right. I was wondering why I said no. There's more questions here. Here we are. Partition size is?
More than.
There we go. And then the last two that we need. Have you there? Of course, now it's not a limit. Go back. Come back. Okay, so we said up to, for partition size is up to, location was sector 0, we said?
Yeah.
128. And lastly, location is primary header. And I hit done. Now we got it. Questions or doubts? We're okay?
What does LBA stand for in the GPT? It's not there. It's in the. It says GPT is arranged by LBA instead of sectors. So one before that.
The slide before you said?
Yeah, yeah. In the middle there.
Okay, GPT. Okay, sectors. We know what sectors are on a hard drive, right? So LBA, LBA stands for a logical block addressing. Compared to the old one, which sectors had to do with the actual cylinder head sector method in MBR. This is just logical block addressing. That's the main difference compared to sectors of those cylinder drives.
So this is why you can partition more, right? Because it's not limited to sectors.
Correct.
Got it.
Any questions? Remember, the new hard drives are almost like a memory stick, right? Any questions or doubts?
I have a question. For master bootloader for SSDs, SSDs don't really have sectors, right? Unless you're considering just the cells. Wouldn't SSDs use logical?
No, they have sectors. They have sectors that I'm aware of.
Yeah, but it's not like a mechanical sectors.
No, it's not a mechanical one, no. It's not a mechanical one, so that's not gonna be like on a regular hard drive. That is correct. It can actually fix the bad sectors internally. Any other questions? Okay, let's continue. Okay, partitioning. Christina, if you, no, I already picked Christina. Carlos.
When to partition, the two common situations that require partitioning are when installing an OS on a new system or when adding a new drive to an existing system. When installing a new OS, the installation program asks how to partition the drive. When adding a new hard drive to an existing system, every OS has a built-in tool to help partition it. Windows offers different tools for partitioning hard drives. I can't see that. Hold on.
CLI.
CLI, right?
Yeah.
Okay. CLI program called DiskPart is an old one. Modern versions use disk management located under computer management and administrative tools.
What's CLI?
Like command line or?
Yeah, command line interface. command line interface. That's the little DOS screen right here. So if you hit this part, you'll be able to see it in here versus the new GUI one, which gives you much more easier stuff to do exactly what you could do there. Any questions or doubts? Both are the same thing. One's just in DOS and the other one's in, actually DOS, I believe they don't want people calling it anymore DOS. So one's in the command line and the other one's an actual GUI representation. Questions or doubts? Have you ever formatted any storage device before? And be careful, I'm willing to bet $100 most of you have formatted something before. Just maybe forgot you did. Have you ever formatted a device? What do you want, Oreo? Anyway, Oreo knows the answer. He already said. He said yes. He's tired of formatting hard drives. Nobody's formatted a USB before? Oreo did.
Like, what do you mean by that, though? Like, format, like?
Formatting is putting a file system on a partition. When you format a drive or a flash drive or a floppy disk, basically you're grabbing that partition and putting an operating system so that you can be able to use or write on it. Without a format, although you've already allocated space to not be used, in essence, you can't do anything with it without formatting it. You must put an operating system on the actual drive for it to be able to use. Every single drive that you use requires some type of formatting, be FAT16, FAT32, FAT64, Ntfs, whichever partitioning you want, depending on obviously the flavor you need. If you ever use a USB stick and it started giving you problems, a lot of times it says, hey, can I recognize this guy? You need to format him before you actually can use it. And that's most likely, most people have probably done it, is on a USB stick itself. As I said, the formatting it creates the file system and it makes the root directory for the file system. The root directory is the one that provides, as I stated, the foundation where you can build upon. You can put folders, you can put all the stuff in here now, because now the table has its cloth, it has everything there to get you ready to be able to do anything you want. If you're not putting a format on it, there's no way you can actually use it. It's not formatted. You just have that drive space allocated, but you can't use it. Questions or doubts? I do apologize, guys. Let's take a break here. I just noticed it's 10:45. Let's stop here. In reference to formatting, don't recall if we actually went through the whole thing, but as we said, it creates a file system, makes the root directory in the file, and obviously each partition and volume must have a format in order to hold data, as I stated before. File systems in Windows, every version of Windows comes with its own built-in formatting utility, depending on obviously what you need. Disk management obviously allows you to partition or create many different types, as we saw. It lets you do the RAID and all that other stuff. In the versions of Windows, though, you have FAT16, because FAT's no longer used, which was only 8-bit, FAT16, FAT32, Ntfs, and extended FAT/FAT64. Those are the new ways of formatting drives. What's the variances? Obviously, your limitations. So FAT16, which is the older ones, is base storage on hard drives by sector. Each sector can actually store up to 512K. If the actual file is bigger than 512K, then it's gonna have to actually use another whole sector, even if it's not gonna use the whole thing, but it'll use a whole sector just to be able to finish storing that file. FAT is representation or means file allocation table. Initially, obviously, a way to structurize data and index the system by keeping track of the actual hard drive. FAT uses an actual built-in spreadsheet inside the hard drive to be able to look up information. Remember, these disks are spinning so quickly, so it'll store on the old hard drives anywhere in there in any which way it wants. The left column of that little actual spreadsheet per se is a hexadecimal number which has 16 bits. It's goes from 000 up to FFF. There are actually 64K sectors that can actually be tracked. The right column now contains the information or the actual status of the sectors. We're gonna see that in a moment. When you first initially format it, it will format and put 000 on that right column, meaning I got nothing here. Or if it's actually bad, it's gonna write FFF7. So don't touch this. Useless, like something on a boat. If you're doing something with a boat. The right column, though, also stores exactly how the file continues, which we'll see in a moment. So, clustering. FAT16 clustering was the actual thing to try to fix all these limitations that we had of 512 bytes per sector. It actually allows you to be able to use several sectors or together as one, which is obviously called clustering, when you combine all contiguous sectors together as one single unit of FAT. You'll notice down here on the bottom, they have a little chart, 16 and how many sectors is in one cluster. Any questions or doubts? We studied FAT16 partitions can go up to 2 gigabytes, not terabytes. FAT16, 2 gigabytes. Questions or doubts? Next slide. Here's the way it stores data. So on the left, all the way on the left, this is when it originally went, and let's pretend this is just one little part of the drive here. Here's all your clusters. If you'll notice, as we said, it starts from 000 to all the way to the end, right? Each and every cluster has a hexadecimal combination. So you'll see here, 3ABB, 3ABC is the next cluster, 3ABD is the next cluster, right? So now, on the next column is status. You'll notice he put 0000 on almost every single line except for one, letting the hard drive know that that sector is bad. Don't use 3ABD. Any questions or doubts on that first part of it? Hello? Is everyone here?
Yo.
How you doing? All right. Any questions of what happens when it first formats? This is a little Excel sheet per se that he has to be able to look up and reference what's on this hard drive. All right. That's how he's able to put Humpty Dumpty back again. So now, what happens here in the next one in the middle? You'll notice that I'm going to store 3 files. Mom text is here. IRS robbing doc. I guess he's going to rob the IRS. And you have IBM help doc. If you notice, here's 3ABB on the first. It had 000. But now that I wrote to it, when it goes, he says 3ABB. What's my status? 3ABC, meaning that the next cluster that pertains to this file is in 3ABC. So he says, okay, so now I got to go over here. Now that I'm here, where does he say? Okay, my next part is in 3ABE. So he completely skips D. And he goes to the next part. And when it finishes the file, so he knows that that file is finished, it says F, 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 F. Nowhere to go from here. It is finished. My next doc, which is on 3ABF, starts here. He lets him know to go to 3AC0, because as we know, F is the last one, is the 15th character, right? So then he goes to 3AC0 to 3AC1, and then boom, F, 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 F. This document has finished. Those are the 3 clusters for him. And the same thing on the next one. He'll do the exact same thing. Any questions on how he actually writes that information into his tables and how he keeps track of it?
So the 4 Fs means equivalent to?
I'm sorry, equivalent to who?
Is it equivalent to like the storing data is like finished storing? Or is it like the storing data is full?
End of file.
Okay.
So letting it know that it is end of that specific file. Remember, the status is going to tell me 1 or 2 things. 0, 0, 0, 0. There's nothing written here. F, F, F7, bad sector or cluster, depending on the drive. And the other one that we should know is the 4 Fs. The 4 Fs means stop going anywhere else. This is the end of this file. Nowhere else to go.
That has nothing to do with like binary.
This is hexadecimal. Yes, it's same thing. Binary, it translates it to binary. It just tells it where in the drive the information is. So when it says F, 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 that is the last sector on the drive. It's actually telling it, we know that it starts on the 0000 is the first sector. F, 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 F is the last sector. So when he goes to the last sector, it's done. It's finished. There's nothing else to go to. That's what it means. So on the status here, if you'll notice in the middle, if he has a hexadecimal, that just tells him where is the next part of this drive. I'm sorry, of this file. Just lets him know how to read the drive and where to go. This is how he also fixes the defragmentation. We're gonna see now. Now I went and deleted the mom.txt file and I added an Excel sheet of tax REC. You notice now, he went and he used the space that I left, right? And he started now here, writing on here, and he had, again, the 3A, and he went to E because he skips this one, because FFF7 means he's bad. And since the file is bigger, and IRS Rob document is in the middle, and so is my IBM help, he jumps over that area and starts writing all the way down here until he finishes writing the information, and then he puts on the table FFFF. And the last one, as you notice, it says 0000, stating that it is clean. There is nothing there. Any questions or doubts on how it actually is aware and how it stores this table?
In all honesty, I have no idea what's going on.
Okay.
I've been following, but it's just
Not a problem.
like no.
You remember that the disk spins really fast, right?
Right.
So what they came up with is to have an internal Excel sheet per se, bad anything else to say about it. So it is a table, and it has these 2 columns. One is to know exactly what spot in the hard drive you're at. That's the left column. What spot? In other words, I have, let's pretend I have 512 little spots, right? So this tells me exactly where I am in the drive, and it gives me a status of that part of the drive. The 4 zeros means that it's clean. There's nothing written on there. That's just a status. It's a way of it knowing what is on that little part of the drive, that little sector of the drive. If it says FFF7 means dead sector, don't write here. It's no good, useless. Then when you start writing, what he'll do is when he starts writing the actual file, as we stated before, he'll start writing out on each sector. So he's got to keep track. So now I want to save mom.txt. So inside his table, he says that mom.txt is here. 3ABB is where it started. And then the next portion or the next part of this file is on this sector, 3ABC. That's the next sector that it's written on. So then it is able to go spin, look for here. Okay, I'm at 3ABC. Here's the other part. So I give you the little bit. Now, where do I go? It says, okay, go to 3ABE. This file is not finished. Continue looking for another piece of Humpty Dumpty. So he starts spinning, and it obviously in milliseconds, and he jumps to the sector that says 3ABE. He gives that part now, and he starts putting Humpty Dumpty again. Then he goes to the table and he says, what? Oh, FF, I'm finished. That's the file. Now you have mom.txt with those 3 pieces put together on your screen when you open up the text. That's how he's able to go back to the hard drive, say, open up the text file. He goes, okay, I got to go to my table. Where is it? Similar to an inventory. You just think about it as a very sophisticated way of inventorying information and breaking it into pieces. Any questions so far until I got to here? Now I'm writing. Go ahead.
I'm following a little bit more. My question is, do we have to know this like exactly by numbers, or is this just like an explanation of what's going on in the background?
You need to know 0, 0, 0, 0. You need to know F, F, F7. And you need to know F, 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 F.
So all F's is finished.
Yeah, all F's is finished because that's the last sector on the drive.
FFF7 is a
Bad sector.
Bad sector. And then all O's is just like the start of the.
Yeah, 0, 0, 0, 0 is the start of the drive. And then FFFF is the end of the drive.
Okay.
So this is just so you understand how he does it. And then all the numbers in the middle is just telling it where the file continues to. You're never going to be seeing this. You do realize there's no way you can go into DOS and say, hey, show me sector thing. No. Just so you understand how it's able to interpret it and give it to you in Windows. So then what happens is, so that you understand now that I deleted this, right? The first thing he's gonna do is he's gonna put 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, allowing this space to be written over. So if I delete this, he'll just mark it 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. He doesn't delete the information in the sector. That's why you can recover things even though you delete it. There's special software that can actually recover files for you because that's all it does. It just marks it that it can be used. So not until you overwrite on that sector and write something else, does it actually disappear from the drive. So when he updates these 4, right, he has 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Now I want to write my Excel file here. And since it's so large, it's larger than the mom text file. He started off over here because he knew that this was space that I can use. And you'll notice he skips over this sector, right? It goes to here. But when he wants to go and start writing, he already knows this is used. I can't touch this. So he just keeps on going down until he finds the first pair of quad zeros. And then on that, he starts writing until he finishes. When he finishes, then he just writes onto the table, FFFF, letting it know that that file, the tax receive XLS, has finished. All the parts are there. So who uses this? Your disk defragmenter. Your disk defragmenter uses this table to now go and move everything around and know what pertains to each file. He's able to put Humpty Dumpty back in order, just like it was when it was a clean drive. So use all the 0000s to move things around and try to get things into the drive back. Make sense? So that when he spins and he's going around, he doesn't have to be jumping all the way around to get to the things. He can just do it in one full swipe. Continuous clusters. This is for obviously the old drives, the hard drives. Questions or doubts?
Question. How does the system know that the file sector is bad? And then when it's bad, does it attempt to repair it?
If he's unable to repair it, he marks it with the FFF7. That's how he knows. That's his code to the drive. He puts it on that little table. Now he knows I can't use that.
So that's a good example of when you will get a file saying this file's been corrupted, right?
No.
No? That's different?
Right now, no, because the when I format it at the beginning, it already marked it. I would give it to you if, let's say, I had used right now the first 3 on this one, and then he went bad. When I go and check the drive and I do a check disk, he will mark it eventually. Instead of saying 3A BD here, he will mark 3A BD as FFF7, and then you would have to obviously recreate the file if it's corrupted.
Oh, I get it. This is done beforehand.
That FF7 in this example happened beforehand, correct? But had it been that this mom text file had been written on this sector and it went bad, that's a bad file. Then when I hit fix disk, if it's unable to fix it, it will mark it as bad. Don't use that cluster. It's bad. Don't write on here.
Okay, got it. And attempting to fix it is using parity, right? It will use some form of parity? Or it just uses some algorithm?
That would be memory that has parity, or RAID 5. Parity has nothing to do with it. It's just try to repair the sector itself, reformatting it and or doing whatever it can to fix the sector. So he just writes 0000 on that spot to try to fix it. And then he tries to, lack of a better way, he just puts 000 and see if he can repair it. If it lets it write the 000 and clean it there, he may be able to repair it. But if not, he'll just mark it as FFF7 unrepairable. Any questions or doubts? Good. Next one. FAT32. This is obviously the later version for the 32 bits, because obviously that's what it means versus the 16 bits per cluster. It supports partitions up to 2 terabytes, as I mentioned a little while ago, allowing more efficient use of the disk space. And if you'll notice, your cluster sizes here are as follow, depending on the actual drive space. Any questions or doubts?
So the FAT32 is essentially just a little bit faster?
Bigger clusters. Instead of only being 16 bits, instead of being only 16 zeros, you can write now 32 zeros in one cluster, one little section of the drive.
That little notation, it has to be defragmented more often. Is that just because it's bigger?
Yeah. Clusters are bigger. Clusters are bigger. Remember, if it grabs that cluster and the file is smaller than that piece of cluster, you can't write on that. Right? So let me go back real quick. Let's say mom.text, right? Let's say that here it only uses 1 bit of the 16. I can't write 15 bits here of the ISR rob doc. I can't touch it. I lose it. That makes sense?
Sorry, give me another example. Like,
So
Each cluster, a cluster is a group of bits, right? In one sector. So now, when I'm writing the mom.txt file, that little cluster is 16 bits, right? Zeros or ones. 16 zeros or ones can fit in there. If when I come in here, let's pretend my file is a 33-bit. All right, is that right? Yeah, 33 bits. So then I'll be 16, 32, and then I only use 1 bit here. Only 1, because that would be my 33rd bit. The other 15 bits, useless. Can't touch it.
oh, I get what you're saying. Okay, so for example, the FAT16 has cluster size of 16 bits, right?
Yeah.
And then a FAT32 would have 32 bits
That's right.
per sector.
Per
Oh, and I
cluster.
get it because,
Cluster.
okay,
Clusters are multiple sectors together. Treated
okay,
as
so
one.
then, okay, that makes sense why. You have a lot of unused clusters if that data is all you need at that point.
Yeah, so you'll notice, let's do the same little game. So I'm gonna do with the mom text file over here. I said it was 33 bits, right? And let's do a FAT32. So what's gonna happen? It's gonna use the first cluster, then the second cluster, and I'm gonna have 31 bits that I can't use. Because 32 plus 1 is 33, so the rest of the bits I can't write on it. All zeros after that. No zeros or ones, nothing. Any questions or doubts?
I do. I see on the cluster size, it says 4 kilobytes. It's not 32 bits.
What?
On the little table that says cluster, it's 4 kilobits, right?
When you format it on this size, the maximum cluster size is 4 kilobytes.
What do you mean by max cluster?
Multiple sectors together as one. That's the way it fragments it, just as it did earlier over here when they explained it to us. Watch. Here's a 16-bit, which has the limit of 64K by 512 bytes per sector.
Oh, okay. I think I get it. So it's a cluster is how it combines all these little spreadsheets. So every spreadsheet is considered a cluster, right?
I'm sorry?
Every spreadsheet is considered a cluster, right?
Every row in the spreadsheet that it has is a set of continuous sectors that are treated as one. Sectors of the drive treated as one. Instead of just using, back in the old days, in the old ones was actually just by the actual bytes of data. Couldn't do continuous sectors as one allocated unit.
Sorry, I'm actually lost at this point on how it's, once again, for me, it's just the terminology and the wording. I'm getting confused.
Okay. You understand that? You don't understand that clustering means that it actually grabs the sectors of the continuous sectors. In other words, ones that are one after another sectors of the drive, so that it can actually use a bigger part to create that file or to store files.
Yeah.
Remember, drives are broken up to sectors. That's what they're originally were, all broken up to sectors. So they created clusters to deal with that limitation.
So a cluster is just part of a sector, correct?
A cluster is several sectors together as one. Several sectors that are next to each other, treated as one logical unit.
So a sector is referring to, in this format, for example, it's all the clusterings in that sector, correct?
You're getting it backwards. Sectors are the sections of the drive. A cluster is a group of sectors treated as one.
Okay, so a cluster is referring to the sector, and then a cluster, no, I'm sorry. Can you give me a picture? Because I'm more of a picture person. I'm getting confused.
Here's the sector of a drive. See it? There, a little bit, a little part in my picture.
I can somewhat see it. I don't know how to make it bigger on my side on your screen.
Here's a sector. See this one here? There's a beautiful picture here. This one come out real good. Can you see this picture here?
Oh, I see it.
So this is one sector. Multiple sectors as one is a cluster. See this? 1, 2, 3, 4 together here. This big portion is a cluster. There's several sectors of the drive treated as one. One part space of the drive. Compared to these little pieces here, it basically creates a set of sectors that are one next to each other as one. And obviously a cluster, like we said, depends on the actual partition and how it's formatted. The bigger the clusters on your FAT32 than FAT16. You don't get it?
I'm trying to understand the picture. So a cluster is just how many sectors there is that are connected, basically.
Sectors are the
Right?
little pieces. Sectors are the little pieces of the drive, the little sections or little areas where you can write information.
And the cluster is just a community of them, basically. They're interconnected.
A set of contiguous, they must be next to each other. Sectors, together as one.
And what does it mean by track on the diagram? This is just telling you like this is part of the sector and this is a part of the sector?
That's where the drive is divided. Right here, look.
Okay.
See this circle? See this circle? See this circle? Those are your tracks. Track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4. You
Okay.
see them?
Yeah, I see that.
So pretend that little arm. You remember the arm that goes in and out? Those are your tracks. It going in and out. The needle going in and out on the actual tracks. Just like an old...
Like a vinyl.
Like a vinyl. Like the old vinyl when they divide the songs, right? Those are your tracks. Remember vinyl, how each song has a little circle that goes around it and you can see physically the circle?
Yeah.
No?
Okay, I think I get it better now. So sectors are just literally parts of the disk drive, and clusters is a continuous collection of it, but it has to be neighbors. They have to be actually connected, and that is a cluster. And you have a limit of that cluster, so you have to make another cluster to hit that limit, which is for FAT16. Is it FAT16? FAT16 is going to be 4 kilobytes, right?
On the FAT16,
Oh no, it's 32.
This many sectors per cluster. So depending on how you actually format it, you format it as a 1 gig. No, is that 1 gig? Or no, 1024 or 2048. That's
Yeah,
how
that's a
many
gigabyte.
sectors. How many sectors per cluster? So in here, it'll have 64 continuous sectors as one cluster.
Okay, I think I'm getting it better now. So the size limit of the cluster depends on how you format how much memory it is. The smaller it is, the less clusters you need. The bigger it is, the more clusters you need. That's what the graph is trying to tell you, right?
That is the way it does it. So you'll notice here though, on the actual cluster size, this one doesn't do that much of the difference here as the other one. In this one, depending again on your drive size and how you're going to be partitioning and formatting it, each cluster size here is 4 kilobytes until you get to the 8 gig, and then it's 8 kilobytes. And then when you get to the 16, it's 16, and again, when you get to 32, it's 32. Above 32, obviously. Any questions or doubts? You guys okay with it? Ntfs, believe it or not, that's what it's called. New Technology File System uses clusters and file allocation tables, but it's more complex than the actual FAT16 and 32. Now you could actually add security onto the files. Prior to this, the read, the write, and all these features that we have wasn't in those old ones. Believe it or not. Most common ones that are going on right now, it also gives us security, it gives us encryptions, and we'll see all of them right now. So the main thing of Ntfs is that each individual file or folder are treated as objects and provides security through an ACL. It allows you to configure, read, write, modify, delete a given file or folder. You can give also full control and or special permissions. The structure of Ntfs is the next thing that it gave us. Uses actually an enhanced file allocation table called the master file table. Ntfs partitions keep a copy of the MFT in the middle of the disk. This obviously is to reduce the chance of losing the MFT in its actual copy. It has a copy of it in the middle. Also allows us for compression. Prior to this, we weren't able to compress any drives. It enables, obviously, in individual files, folders to save space on the actual drive and compress. Obviously, this adds time. So now, to access the file, it must decompress, and it's going to be slower. Disk quotas. This is a feature so that multiple users do not eat up the disk, especially on servers. Disk quotas is a great feature because of the fact that users love to use use servers like if it was their hard drive. We've had users that just start dumping a whole bunch of stuff up there and they don't even use their computer to save the information. So this quotas came up. Now I can set a limit of how much that user can actually use on the drive to avoid those type of problems. Fair warning. Usually if you write the information, you're using up your space. And somebody else deletes that file, you still don't have space. Anyone hear me?
We hear you.
So Lázaro wrote the file on the server, and then Jordan came in, he looked at the file, he said, no, that's useless. He deleted it. That space that was allocated to Lázaro is still used up. Still says he used it up. Seen that a lot. Encryption. I'm pretty sure everybody understands what encryption is. Obviously, the encryption is called Ntfs, or encryption file system. It allows you to encrypt a file, a folder, or the whole full folder with all its files within. Next feature it has is the clustering sizes. Ntfs will allow you to adjust the actual cluster size instead of being static, as we saw in the other ones. It supports partitions of 16 terabytes and on a actual dynamic disk, and up to 2 terabytes on a basic disk. So servers with RAID and all that stuff, they have to 16 terabytes, and a regular hard drive up to 2 terabytes. Questions? Doubts? FAT64. Woohoo! Finally, we have been blessed. So since FAT32 only supports up to 2 terabyte drives and files, believe it or not, that are up to 4 gigabytes. The file grows bigger than that. Not coming here. Not on a FAT32. Any questions or doubts so far? What did it call it? Extended FAT or FAT64. It supports up to 16 exabytes. As I told you guys, gotta know what these things are. You're gonna start seeing big names out here. I would definitely go and look up what's megabytes, what's gigabytes, what's exabytes, what's zettabytes, what's yottabytes. All of those you should know. The file table extends to 64 bits clusters per entries. The extended FAT is used by the large capacity, obviously removable drives that are above 32 gigabytes, like your USB drives and memory cards that are nowadays. The USB drives don't use Ntfs. Does anybody know why?
I'm going to guess to make it easier, since Ntf has encryption, compression, so that's a lot of stuff that's going to make it more complicated.
Security is the main issue. So when you write on it, it's going to put your SID, security identifier, correct. Also the encryption and everything. That might create a problem when you go and you put it into another computer. So you don't want to use that on USB drives because it's only going to be useful on that computer. Any questions or doubts? File system in Linux. The most Linux distributions has the X4 by default. Older distributions use the X2 or the X3. Linux file system can be read and write on Ntfs, FAT32, FAT64, HTF+, that's from Mac, or the X2, X3, and X4. Those are the file systems. Keynote, though, that was from the Mac. On Windows, X4 is not compatible with Windows, but X3 is. Main strength of X4 is that it supports up to 1 exabyte and individual file sizes up to 16 terabytes, one file. The directory can contain up to 64,000 subdirectories compared to Windows, which has a limitation of how many subdirectories it can do. And obviously it improves on the performance and reliability of the X3 compared to the X3. Other one, be sure you guys didn't know this, but CDs have CDFS, file system of choice for actual CD, and you have UDF for the DVD Blu-ray drives, which is called the Universal Disc Format, compared to the CD-ROM file system, CDFS. Any questions or doubts on those two? Next is your NFS. Network File System is Distributed File System Protocol, originally developed by Sun Microsystems. Makes it possible for files in the network to be accessed easily, no matter which OS you have. You can have a host using Unix and the other one using Windows, whatever it is, and you should be able to make the share still function. Questions or doubts on NFS or CDF or UDF? Okie dokie. Recognize the best format for each one. Hard drive or Windows OS? Which one should I do?
Definitely Ntfs. It's native to the operating system.
Okay. A 4 gigabyte USB drive.
I would use FAT32 or UDF.
UDF on a DVD?
Oh no,
Or-
never mind. I thought UDF was Ntfs. I was thinking it wrong. My bad. That's something else. Well, that would be for DVD though.
Okay.
Linux will use ext4,
Okay.
and extended FAT will be for 128 or FAT64.
Any questions or doubts? Everybody agree?
Yep.
Okay. That's it, done. All right. Next slide. To create partitions or volumes, you right-click on any unallocated space. This is inside the disk management itself. So we'll see here, here's the actual physical disk 0. My various partitions in this black area here, you'll notice that I can actually do a new simple volume wizard. When it opens up, you'll notice that it has this little GUI for you to be able to decide what's the maximum space you have and what's the minimum that you can create with that actual partition. Always format based on binary. In other words, don't put 4000, put 4096, 1024, 2048. Don't do round numbers. Get a calculator, figure it out, because if not, you're going to have wasted space. Questions or doubts on what I'm talking about? On the size. Obviously, you could do whatever you want, but I don't like doing that. I like using it up the right way. All right.
Can you show like an example of it?
I'm formatting a drive and I want to do anything. I always come in here and I'll do something like this. Figure out what I want. I want 64 I want 8. That's 256 bytes or 256 megabytes. I'm not going to put 200. I'm not going to put 250. I need to make sure that I do the binary counting. So remember, it's bits, it's zeros and ones, right? Therefore, since it is binary, when you're setting the size, if you set it to an even number, it's not going to be right. When it does the bytes and all that stuff, you're going to wind up with space that you're not actually using. So you would need to calculate which one is which. We know that it starts off at 0, then you have 1, then you have 2, then you have 4, then you have 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, 8192. Should at least be able to do that by now. That'll tell you how to create the space and what you're doing here. You could always look it up. It's not a major issue. Questions or doubts? On the next one, when you hit next, it will ask you what letter you want to draw, you want to assign to that, or you can actually mount it to an empty Ntfs folder. You can actually mount that space to a given folder, and it will appear as a folder within a given drive instead of a separate drive.
So that's like network mapping, but more internal, right?
It's to add more space to a given folder that's already in another partition. In other words.
Oh, so basically extending a folder that hit its limit, right?
Empty folder is really, you want to create an empty folder and put it inside that drive, basically. We'll play with these. Most likely, you can play with them inside your virtual machines and try to create all these things. We'll add maybe an extra disk, or maybe it should allow us, if the operating system believes that we have a large enough disk, to use the unallocated space and separate it. We can look at that during our off times. Any questions so far on the wizard? So first it's going to ask me how much space, and then it's going to ask me if I want to assign a letter, if I want to mount it to an empty Ntfs folder, or if I don't want to put any letter on it at all. Doubts? Next. Now that it's time to choose what type of format you want. You can create Ntfs or whatever it is, depending on what you want. And as you notice, allocation, unit size, usually leave it default, unless if you want to start creating different sizes. Leave it, let it be. Lastly, when you hit next, finally, just review everything that's here. Make sure you have everything as exactly how you want it. And then you hit finish, and it should create the drive for you. Any questions or doubts? Here is now, I had a partition already, and I can actually go in here, and now that it's a healthy partition, I can actually go and create and perform a quick format, which will not write all zeros and ones onto it. Quick format, as we learned, is just put on the actual file system, but it doesn't actually erase everything on the drive, if there was anything on the drive. Questions or doubts? When formatting a storage device, it's possible, obviously, as I said, go quick or full format. Both formats file remove the partition. The difference is the quick format does not check for bad sectors at all. It won't verify if there's something bad, so it won't write the FF, F7 on the table. Any questions? And if you'll notice, on this little drop-down menu, what is it doing? Exactly what I told you before, right? Allocation size, if you'll notice on here, is you could actually set it, and then you'll notice it does the 96 bytes. Okay. Mounting partitions as folders. So partition volumes can be mounted as a folder on another drive. This enables you, as we said, to use the existing folders to store more data that couldn't fit in the single drive and or partition. To create, obviously, a mount one, you right-click again on allocated space, and new simple volume. Then you browse, obviously, and you select here where it is, and you create a new folder inside that area. You'll browse and put the name of the folder of where you want inside that drive. So the C drive, you'll see the C drive, and you place it inside that folder, inside the existing folder that you want to put it in. Now, let's listen to some kind words from our friend, Professor Messer.
If you need to manage anything related to your disks or your volumes in Windows, then you need to use the disk
management utility. One of the easiest ways to start this utility is inside of computer management. You can choose storage and disk management. One important consideration when using the disk management tool, some of the tasks that you can perform inside of disk management will delete your data and it will be unrecoverable. So make sure you know exactly what you're doing when you make any changes inside of the disk management utility. Inside of disk management, every drive is assigned a disk status. For example, a drive will show a volume name, a drive letter if one is assigned, the size of the drive, the type of file system on the drive, and then the status. The status of this particular drive is healthy. That means that this volume is working normally and exactly as expected. It might say heavy and show at risk, which means that this drive is currently operating, but it has experienced input and output errors, and it's possible that this drive could be failing. If this is a new drive and you're in the process of initializing this drive, you'll see the disk status message initializing, which is perfectly normal when working with those new drives. If the drive cannot be started, you could have a bad drive or a bad file system. You'll see a disk status that says failed. If you have a RAID 1 or a RAID 5 array inside of your computer and one of those disks is failed, the disk status will show that you have a failed redundancy. At that point, you'll need to remove the bad drive and replace it with a known good drive. If this is a RAID 1 or a mirrored array, that means that you'll now have a brand new drive and all of that information will need to be copied from one drive to the other. This is called resyncing. So if you are running RAID 1 and you've just replaced the drive, the disk status will show you that there is a resyncing process occurring. With RAID 5, we have to rebuild data. We're not simply copying data to the new drive. So with RAID 5, the disk status will show that it is regenerating or recreating the data based on the parity that was missing in that missing drive. With storage space, especially storage space that's on a server, you never have enough free space. You're always going to be running out of available drive space on that device. There are some ways that you can extend the size of some of the space that's on that drive. One of them is to mount a drive. This allows you to extend the space, but instead of it looking like a completely separate drive that you've installed, you create a new set of storage that looks like a folder that's in the existing drive structure. This is seamless to the user. They don't even realize that it's a new drive that's been added to the system, and this provides an instant way to increase the amount of storage space on that device. We're looking at a server that's used by the accounting department, and they've created a series of folders within their accounting storage area for quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. Well, now we've come to the end of the year, and they need additional drive space available. Instead of creating a separate drive and creating a separate share from that drive, we're simply going to mount a new folder inside of this drive that's pointing to an extra 120 gig SSD that we found. Inside of the disk management, you can see that we already have installed that 120 gig drive. It's not been assigned a drive letter, so we're going to right mouse click, change drive letter and paths, and choose add. instead of selecting assign the following drive letter and assigning a separate drive letter to that, we're going to mount this in an empty Ntfs folder. And in this particular case, I'll choose Browse. We'll choose the C drive. I want to put this in my users professor folder. I have some documents, accounting, and you can see the Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 folders are under that. I want to create a new folder for year end and click OK. That's exactly where I'd like that drive to be. We'll click OK, and it will now assign that or mount that drive into a separate folder inside of that directory called year end. And now I have 120 extra gig of drive space that they can use to finish all of their year-end reports. You may run into a situation where you need additional drive space used for something different than what you originally planned. For example, we may have decided that the accounting department really only needs 60 gigabytes of disk space, which means we can use the other 60 for some other purpose. If we right mouse click on that 120 gig volume, we have the option to shrink that volume. And it specifies the total size before shrink, which is 122,862 megabytes, and the size of the available that we have. Since no data has been written to this drive, most of the drive is available for us to be able to shrink. We're going to specify the space in megabytes. In this particular case, we'll choose 60,000 to specify that 60 gigabytes, which leaves 62,862 afterwards, and we click the shrink button. At that point now, we have two separate volumes that have been created. One that is our existing volume for the year-end information for accounting, and now we have an additional 60 gig that we could use for other purposes. Of course, you may have to extend that volume later to fit more information in, so you can always right mouse click, extend the volume, and then we're going to specify that extra 60,000 on that unallocated drive, and we're going to add, let's say, an additional 20,000 or 20 gigabytes to that to make that drive just a little bit bigger for the folks in the accounting department. In some editions of Windows, you're able to create a mirrored or a striped set of volumes that you could use for redundancy. Let's create a mirrored 120 gig volume for the accounting department. We've installed now a separate 120 gig drive, and if we right mouse click on one of those, we could choose New Mirrored Volume. The new mirrored volume wizard says that this will help us create this volume, so we'll click Next. We see that we have two disks, and the one that we have selected plus the other that is available, we'll choose that one since that's the only other choice that we have available to create a mirror. Both of these drives are exactly the same size, and we'll click Next. At this point, we can assign either a drive letter or we could mount that particular volume in an Ntfs folder. In this case, let's choose drive letter E and click Next. This will now format the volume with Ntfs. It'll be called New Volume, and in this case, we'll choose Perform a Quick Format. And then we'll click Next. The new mirrored volume wizard gives us a description of what our settings are, and we'll click Finish. Disk Management now says that this operation will convert the selected basic disks to dynamic disks. If you convert the disk to dynamic, you will not be able to start installed operating systems from any volume on the disks except the current boot volume. Are you sure you want to continue? In our case, these are simple data volumes. We will not be booting any operating systems, so we'll choose Yes. Once Windows finishes the format, we now have a new volume, Drive E. That new Drive E is a 120 gig drive to the end users. But for us, we know that these are actually two separate drives that contain redundant information that is being mirrored by the operating system. If you want to take this idea of adding or removing storage to the next level, you may want to look at a Windows feature called Storage Spaces. This is primarily designed for cloud-based systems or data centers so that they can easily add or remove storage space. This also adds a lot of flexibility with the management of this space. You have different tiers of space that you can make available and different types of administrative control that you can assign to those particular spaces. The first thing that's created for storage space is a storage pool. This is a group of storage devices that you've put together. You can combine many different types of drives with different sizes to create one large pool of storage. And then you can add or remove different drives from that pool as needed. Now that you've created a pool of storage, you can now start creating spaces from that storage. And you can allocate virtual disks from the available space that you have in that pool. You can specify that these are standalone virtual disks. They could also be mirrored virtual disks or striped virtual disks. You can also build hot spares into these virtual drive arrays. So if you happen to have a mirrored array that loses a drive, the hot spare is immediately available to act as a replacement drive. You can immediately resynchronize that data and maintain the redundancy.
We'll stop here and we'll continue, I guess, after with troubleshooting, implementing partitions. Partitioning errors generally falls into two categories: failing to actually partition the drive or making the actual wrong size. Sorry, excuse me. Wow. Breadcrumb there. Sorry about that. To fix the problem, open disk management and redo the actual partition correctly. If the problem is a secondary drive, if the problem is the actual OS drive, then use CLI or Windows installation tools to actually redo everything. Questions or doubts? Next slide. Alexa, if you can help me read this one.
Failing to format a device makes the drive unable to hold data. Accessing a drive in Windows results in a drive is not accessible error or invalid media type error. Corrupted files can create the invalid media error.
Okay. Any questions on the failing to format? Those are your errors there. Questions or doubts? Physical problems. Teresa, if you can help us out with this one.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, physical problems. Physical problems in hard drives manifest themselves in several ways. Read-write failures, a lot of noise, or drive seems to disappear. Symptoms. If mechanical drives begin to make any of the following sounds, it is about to die. Continuous high-pitched squeal, a loud clinky noise, a short pause, and then another series of clicks, continuous grinding and rumbling. Solutions. If hard drive is about to die, the solution is to back up data and replace the drive. When a hard drive with an OS dies, the system will lock up. If it is a second drive, it will stop showing in Windows Explorers. In that case, power and data cables and connectors should be checked.
Questions or doubts? Physical problems. Thank you, Teresa. Okay. So, next slide. I'm going to break you guys into your groups. Try to use any forum to try to figure it out. If you don't understand it, go ahead and feel free to call me in. But you'll have slide 38, slide 39, slide 40 and 41 to work as a group. Remember, the internet is your friend. Therefore, we always should use our resources, be that it is maybe our co-partners at work or whatever forum we can find if we don't know the solution ourselves and or the symptom of the drive. Questions or doubts before we break out into your groups?
For this one, I have like many answers, but the most likely answer for this one is that it actually made an error, which as rare as we read the textbook. And this is a common error in Windows 7 specifically, where it will fail installation and you will have to delete the partition again and try again. If that doesn't work, it's possible that it was already a used drive and it may have a partition already inside it that cannot be overridden. That's very often with the ext format, which is Linux with the Anaconda. That could also affect it. So you're going to have to go into a boot recovery to erase that data, usually on a Linux system, and then try reformatting it again. If that doesn't work, usually it's maybe a partition error with Windows on the actual hard drive. So therefore you'll have to go into a different Windows, go into the partition, erase everything again, and then try to format it again. Then you go out, try to partition it in the drive and see if that works. If none of that works, most likely there's actually physical damage to the hard drive.
But if I repartition, wouldn't I lose everything?
Yes, but sometimes, unfortunately, and I know this because I experienced it myself, some partitions cannot be overridden. I do not know why. Like, for example, the Anaconda on Linux, if you have a partition in a drive, especially a solid state drive, for some weird reason, Windows is unable to overridden it. It says it's protected. It will not override it. I had to go into Windows, sorry, not Windows, Linux. I think it's Linux's partitioning. I forgot what it's called. Had to partition it out to a format like F32, then go to Windows, and then I was able to format the drive again.
You were probably on X4 then, right?
Yeah, and it was on actually NX3. I had a huge problem with it. I almost lost the flash drive because it just refused to be reformatted because I was trying to make a bootable drive on Windows on a very expensive flash drive, and I was like, nope, I'm not losing this drive. No.
Did anybody else get anything else? Team 2 or 1? Sorry, no, that was team 2 that just spoke. Team 1.
The one that says selected is not of the GPT partition style. I thought it was just you just had to pick a different partition style. That it was the incorrect one.
It could be many things, right? So depending on what it is, yeah, you could actually reboot the PC in legacy BIOS mode, compatibility mode, which obviously will let you use the existing partition. From the looks of it, the UEFI mode is looking for a GPT partition, and it sounds like it has an MBR. Or as Lázaro alluded to, it could be that obviously the partition, if it's not an MBR, it's just a type of partition that it's not able to recognize. That obviously is one of the issues you could have. So workaround, you can boot up in legacy mode for BIOS compatibility, make it look at an MBR and see if it actually now can recognize it before you actually go and delete any partitions. Careful. That's if you want to see the face that I had when the first time I removed the partition. I wouldn't remove partitions unless if you're 100% sure. Okay? Because when you partition the drive and everything, that's serious stuff there. You will lose information. Any questions or doubts?
Diego, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about slide 2, not slide 1.
Okay.
So I gave the right answer to the wrong question.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah, but at least the part that you told me about the EXT part where it was the only thing I was there, but I kind of got the gist of it that you were on the wrong one there. So that's why I was saying if anybody else got anything else, but yeah.
But I get it.
Your idea was correct, because if it's not a GPT and and if it's EXT3 or an EXT4, if the drive is looking for a GPT style partition, it's not going to see it.
Got it. And yeah, it makes sense that you have to have a BIOS that supports it. That's how it works.
Any other questions or doubts on the first one? Obviously, if the person has backup of data, usually just repartitioning the whole thing could be the easiest thing to do. But It all depends on what we have and the flexibility you have. Number 2. So we said that Windows could not format a partition on disk 0. The error occurred while preparing the partition selected for installation, or the actual installation of Windows. What can I do? So, seems to be a brand new drive that's partitioned on disk 0. Well, not a brand new drive, but at least a brand new partition on disk 0 where the error occurred while preparing the partition for your actual selected installation. New installation.
If it's a new drive, I would just delete the partition and try again. And if I continue to get that error, I'll just use a different format or a more easier format just to test to see if the drive is not defective. But at that point, I will use a test diagnostic.
But it's not formatted. How am I going to test it?
There's some diagnosis tools that can test the
physical drive you're saying?
Hmm?
You're saying
the physical.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, because at that point, if it's brand new and it's not working out of the box after you try different formats, that's a sign that either your OS is not, there's something wrong with your OS, or there's something wrong with your program that you have that's trying to format it, or that there's something wrong with the disk itself.
Okay. Another thing, I don't know if you guys know, if you have a bootable Windows DVD, you could actually attempt to boot up with that. And then when you go into it, you can try to hit the install now, and usually it'll delete all the, obviously you're gonna first delete all the partitions, create a brand new partitions, as you said, and then you can boot up with the CD and let it do the format and installations. You have also the capability of, if it's not letting you delete it out there, when you come into the advanced mode of installing it with the DVD, inside the setup screen of it, there's a little section that says advanced, and in there, it will allow you to delete all the partitions on disk 0 also. So depending on which way to go. Anyone else get anything else maybe from their forums and or locations that might have give us another choice for Windows? All right, next one. Drive is not accessible. The volume does not contain. Is this sharing? Doesn't look like it was sharing. Am I sharing?
Yeah, no, we don't see your screen.
Drive is not accessible. The volume does not contain a recognized file system. Please make sure that all required file system drivers are loaded and the volume is not corrupt. Any ideas, or anyone was able to find a forum to help us out?
For this one, the first thing goes in my head is you have a multi-boot computer. You have one that's Windows, one is Linux. You're in your Windows and you realize you can't access a file because it was formatted in a different format that Windows has recognized, known as ext4 or any lower version. So that's a version that Windows does not recognize natively. For it to work, you somehow, I don't know if it's possible, you have to download a program and have Windows recognize it, or have a third-party application to be able to open that file system, or you just go to VM or to the other drive to see that file. If none of that is the case, it could be a sign that the file or partition is actually damaged, and you can try to fix that by repartitioning it at that point.
What happens if this happened when I first boot?
That's a sign that something got corrupted.
Right. What else could it be? One more thing that it could be. Make sure you guys are fully aware before you go and erase everything. One more thing can happen while I'm booting up. You'll be surprised what it is.
The motherboard doesn't recognize it?
Close. You're like right in the area.
So if it's not configured on the motherboard, that means it doesn't recognize it. Oh, maybe the hard drive got disconnected.
Well, it's seeing it. It says the volume does not contain a recognized file system.
Okay. Then maybe something happened with the driver?
It's booting up, so that's when it first starts. I turned it on, I got the black screen, and then all of a sudden when it's gonna go to it, boom.
It sounds like there's something wrong with the boot master record. It can't boot it, right? So if it can't boot, that means there's something wrong with the record.
Correct.
Oh, the boot order?
Somebody just said something. They just hit it.
Order.
Yes, that is a huge clue. The boot order.
Boot order.
That was a huge clue right there. He's almost, I mean, like he's on top of that guy right there. You just got to give me one more word that's causing that. It's in the boot order. That is correct. There is something going on there. Believe it or not, if the boot order says that a DVD, USB, or any other peripheral is first, then the hard drive, and the young lady or young man happens to leave a USB that's not bootable on your computer, when you turn it on, it's going to give you this error.
I had that error before in my workplace. Somebody had a flash drive on one of the terminals, and every time everybody's like, why is this computer not working? And then I looked at it and I was like, it's trying to boot. Why is it trying to boot? So I would have to manually boot it to Windows.
Yeah.
Until eventually I found out it was a flash drive.
Yeah.
In the back. It was like
one of the ones that you gotta be careful, man. When I've seen people go and erase everything, and then when they come back, all of a sudden the next day the user has the exact same problem, and they're about to go and remove the whole hard drive and give them a whole hard drive. When they finally see that USB stick that's actually in the back of the computer instead of the front, they're like, oh. So sometimes don't be careful on and make sure we know exactly the reason for, because usually when it says this is that the device itself, we don't know which device because it's not saying here that it is what drive, right? It just says drive is not accessible. The volume does not contain a recognized file system. So it means that usually that drive or device has become raw, which doesn't have a file system. It's completely raw when it comes to the booting of an OS. Doesn't mean that I don't have the capability of reading it. It's just it can't boot up. Doesn't have the file systems for that. So I've seen people do that. It's very, very tricky when you see this error. You got to make sure which drive is the one that's reporting this issue before you go and start deleting, recreating things, or doing anything. Obviously, if it is the actual drive that's causing that, I can fix this. There is a fix for this. And fix MBR is one of them. I can actually try to fix the master boot record within the actual drive if it's an MBR.
How intrusive is it, by the way, if you can rank it? Because I'm like thinking about it in a test question if we get something like this.
What's intrusive?
Like, I know that there was a question on, I think it was on Kaplan, where you had options and 2 of them were right, but the answer was the less intrusive one. And it wasn't master boot records. It was something else. I can't remember. Like, what would be your troubleshooting step before you reach this one?
Before you reach doing a fix fix, you're saying?
Like, let's say you can't log in to your computer because Windows won't load up.
Mm-hmm.
What troubleshooting set is the least intrusive at that point? Should you, of course, check the drive before trying to fix the master boot roller, for example?
I don't think. Repeat again. It broke up on my side.
How do I say it again? Never mind. Maybe later when I can put it together. But it was kind of a question related. When should you use that before any other methods?
A fixed disk? You
No,
see?
fix the master
Yeah,
boot
fixed
record.
the MBR. Fix this the MBR. You're saying, right?
Yeah, I just want to know how intrusive it is.
It will only attempt to fix the disk master boot record. That's what it's going to do. Shouldn't damage anything. It's going to attempt to fix it.
Okay, I thought it was intrusive because I remember I got a test question on that in Kaplan, and I got it wrong because I said it was intrusive.
It's more intrusive maybe than the other selection that you had. Maybe the other selection was to check the cables or something like that. Not sure what selections you had, so we got to look at the selections that are available. Once again, they're going to try to trick you. They're going to give you 2 or 3 right answers sometimes. Just got to be able to pick out of the ones that they're giving you which one is the least intrusive. Which one's less impact. So I guess if you find the question and we can see the sources afterwards later on today, and then we can see that question and see why the answer is the answer that you're talking about. Any other ideas on this one here if this drive is not accessible? So questions or doubts? Drive is not accessible at all. The disk is corrupt and unreadable.
For this one, question is, are you in the OS doing this, or is it when you just start up the computer? Because I realize that's kind of the scenarios we have.
Not sure. Repeat the question.
So which scenario specifically? Because I realize there's 2 scenarios. Is when you boot the computer and you can't load your operating system, or you have your operating system, but you can't reach that extra drive.
Yeah, it could be in which one. Doesn't matter which one.
Okay, so in this case, if your operating system or your BIOS says, hey, the drive is unacceptable or corrupted, most likely it is. You can do some programs first, if possible, to check the health of the drive before saying that it is no longer that good anymore.
Okay, what about if it's inside Windows? I think you're overthinking it a little bit more. What about if it was inside Windows? It's the extra drive.
If it was an extra drive, I would attempt to probably repartition it.
Why would I repartition it? I would erase everything in there. That is too intrusive.
Oh, you mean
use a check disk?
Thank you. Yes, I will run a check disk first. See what's going on. Why is it corrupted, unreadable? See if the OS can actually do its job and fix the problem. Same thing again on the boot up. If I see this, I will double check that I have no boot order issue here where a USB and or some other thing is attempting to boot. And if it is my drive, I would get a bootable disk that allows me to get into DOS, that I can run a check disk /fix to see if I can actually fix the issues. Never go in and delete partitions as a solution right away. That should be your last resorts. You delete a partition, you're erasing everything. So unless if you have a perfect copy of everything that's in there, deleting partition should be your last thing. It will create much more problems than what you want. Any questions or doubts? Unless if you have some fancy recovery tool, it costs a lot of money. I wouldn't play that game too much. Careful with partitions. Same thing with the other one. If it's internal or external, check disk is our friends / fix. Usually it goes and attempts to. What happens if I do a check disk on the booting one? Can I do that while it's booted up? Does Windows allow me to check disk / fix on a booting partition? Go ahead and attempt it if you like. It's going to give you a...
Repeat the question?
What happens if the partition that I want to do check disk on happens to be my booting partition, the one that the OS is running on? Will Windows allow me to do a check disk / F to fix everything when I go into the command prompt? So if I go into command prompt, what would it, is it going to do it or will it say something to me?
Sorry, can you say it again? You're breaking up for me.
Check disk, right? You see it on the screen?
Yeah.
Can I check disk, the C drive, that is my booting partition in Windows?
Yes.
You can? All right, let's
Well,
see.
not with that command.
No, I'm talking about check disk. That's the command I'm saying. Run check disk / F on the booting OS.
Okay. I don't think you
Hit
can.
this, you'll see that an actual command will be denied. Access denied. You do not, on this one, I don't have sufficient. But either way, if you come into yours, let me see, I'll try to run it as administrator. Hold on a second, because God only knows nowadays, even command prompt has to be run as administrator to allow you. Right click, run as administrator, and it opens a brand new little thing. Yes, and you'll know because you're in the Windows System 32 folder. Check disk. Check disk / F. Should give you. Now, what does it tell me?
It's being in use.
Correct. And then it tells me, would you like to schedule it the next time the computer restarts? Before I actually start using the OS, which has all these files open, would you like me to check it? So what it'll do is that next time it boots up, the computer will do the check disk before it boots up onto the operating system. It's the only way you can do a volume that contains the operating system that is currently running, because that drive is currently in use at all time while that operating system is open. As I told you before, that's why you need space in a hard drive, minimum of 30%, I think it was. When it goes below that, it starts getting very, very slow, because it needs to decompress the OS and open it so you can run on top of it. So if it's the volume where the OS is, it will never let you do it while it's running. It's going to ask you to reboot, and it'll do it on the reboot. Just an FYI. Any questions or doubts? Ja, Dr. Halle, Dr. Halsemer. Number 1. Which is the most complete list of file systems that Windows can have? Is it A, FAT16, FAT32, Ntfs? B, FAT16, FAT32, FAT64, Ntfs? C, FAT16, 32, or D, FAT16, Ntfs? What are the file systems? Complete list. A,
Go with B.
B as in boy, or D? B as in dog?
B as in boy.
Okay. And someone said C.
Yeah.
Okay.
C.
So which one do you guys agree with? C or D? I mean, yeah, C or B? Sorry about that, Jordan. Keep on changing your answer.
Okay.
You guys remember what we just went over? What are the partitions that I can create? I mean, sorry, formats that I can create. File allocation table. Fats.
Oh, never mind. Never mind. It is B.
So B.
Yeah, B.
Those are the various ones that Windows currently has. Obviously, the latest and greatest is using either FAT64 or Ntfs, depending on the size of the drive and features. Next one. What program does Microsoft include with Windows, to partition and format a drive? Which one's the GUI one that allows us to do that? Is it A, the format command, B, disk management console, C, disk administrator console, or D, system commander?
B, disk management console.
Everyone agree? B as in boy, disk management console? Hmm? No? Yes? Maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a little GUI that we saw several times. It's the disk management console. Number 3, what does Ntfs use to provide security for individual files and folders? Is it A, a dynamic disk? Is it B, ECC? Is it C, access control list? And or D, MTF? Monday through Friday.
C.
We have one vote for C. Very doubtful, but it's vote.
I vote for C.
Okay. 2 votes for C. Everyone agree? That's correct. It is C. It's an access control list is what it actually uses. Anybody know what MTF stands for?
We forgot.
I don't think you know. They're just throwing names in there. MTF.
Master file table.
No, not MFT. They put MTF there.
Master the file.
Yeah, it's a Microsoft tape format and or modulation transfer function, depending and or which one we're talking about. Modulation transfer function deals with the measurement of the monitor sharpness, while the Microsoft tape format is a backup tape format developed by Seagate and Microsoft for formatting tapes. Therefore, it has nothing to do with what they were talking about, just in case if you want to know what MTFS was. To make your files unreachable by others, what should you use? A, clustering. B, compression. C, disk quota. Or D, encryption.
Encryption.
Everyone agree, encryption?
Yes.
That one's pretty easy, self-explanatory. Number 5, how do you effectively expand the capacity of an Ntfs drive? Do you A, create an extended partition to extend the capacity? No. B, install a second drive and mount a folder on the original smaller Ntfs drive? C, convert the drive to a dynamic disk and create a mirror set? Or D, format the drive with a quick format option? Which one would effectively expand the capacity of an existing Ntfs drive? What makes it bigger? He did it with the year end. when he showed us. He had Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and then he ran out of space supposedly on the hard drive, and he had a brand new 100 and something gig or terabyte drive. And he did something with it, and it looked like it was existing in it, like if it was.
He had to get a second drive, and then he mounted that drive to a folder, so the users can use it.
And for them, it looks like a folder. They have no clue that that's an extra drive. Seamless to the user. They don't have to go to an E drive or G drive or an H drive to start using it. It's inside the folder itself.
Sounds convenient.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you don't want to recreate everything, right? You just want to add more space. That's a great feature. Any questions or doubts? That's all the questions we have for this one. I'll be stopping the recording here if we don't have